Okay. Show me.
Hi there guys, welcome back to the Osd channel. Thank you very much for tuning in for part 3 in my flying tank series. Yeah, so this here is the MX F5 frame with MX motors. In part 2 we tested these motors. And yeah, it might be a bit confusing. You've already seen this quadcopter fly. However, it's still without its flight stack. So in this part in the series we'll take a look at the stack I'll be using for this build. And usually I go for the diatone Mamba stacks. You probably know that if you follow my channel. And those work out well, but I wanted to try something different. There are a couple of reasons for that. Let me, well, show you and tell you. Also in this video we're gonna fly the setup. So it's not just a show and tell of the stack, we're actually gonna test it as well. So let's see what stack I selected. There you go, it is a stack from GepRC, one of their span stacks. This is a 30.5 by 30.5 stack, F7, and it's a flight controller and a 4-in-1 ESC, no VTX. So there again are a couple of reasons for me picking this one. Let me show you. So a GepRC stack. I've actually flown a lot of ready to fly or buy and fly GepRC quadcopters, but I've never used any of their stacks on self-built quadcopters. So that's one reason to, well, at least try it, right? Why not? See if it works out. And the second reason for me to choose this stack for this build is I saw the pictures online, product pictures, and everything looked very clean and well designed. Now, what does that mean? Yeah, not all that much maybe, but if you see shortcuts or things that were changed at the last minute, that'll often result in the setup, the board not looking as clean, as well sorted as you see it here, right? This is the first time I'm having a look at this stack, and indeed it looks very clean. And so the last reason, and again, I usually use Mamba diatone stacks, and I know that in combination with a Rush VTX, this is the Rush Ultimate Plus tank, I know that I can make that work well in the sense that it will have a clean FEB signal. So what I'll do is we'll obviously take a look at this stack and see what you get for your money, and if there's weird things, positive things, whatever. But I also want to see, well, if the quadcopter flies well, obviously, and if the video feed is clean. Now this stack, this is actually an HD stack. It's their Span F7 HD with 50 amp 4-in-1 ESC. This is meant for DJI Digital. It accommodates DJI Digital. It has a plug over here for you to plug in your air unit, for instance, or your Visa set. Obviously, you can use these stacks for analog setups, which is what I'll do. It was kind of hard to decide actually whether I'd build a digital quadcopter again or an analog one. However, it is easier for me to show you amp draw, voltage and such in an analog build. Also, this will be a nice crash copter, right? It'll cost less with an analog setup, so that'll make it more relaxing to fly for me. That's what it works like for me. Okay, let's see what you get with this stack. Obviously you get the 4-in-1 ESC, and we'll take a closer look at everything in a second, and the F7 flight controller. Then you get one connecting cable. This is not a flat ribbon cable, luckily, but this is to hook up, well, actually, what is this? This is for the air unit, so I'll probably won't be using this one. Nice that they include a cable, by the way. You get an XC60, which is already soldered up to the wires. Neat. You get a capacitor. And this is a 470 microfarad 35 volts. So not huge, but it should be enough, especially if the electronics, the capacitors on this 4-in-1 ESC are already good enough. We'll see how this works out, right? How clean will our video feed be? And let's see, you get screws, you get stack screws in 2 lengths. That's nice. That's thoughtful actually. You get black gummies if you don't like the red gummies, right? Could be. And I'm not sure if there's any difference in stiffness. These black ones might be more supple. Might be. But it's especially nice that you get 2 lengths in stack screws. That's thoughtful. I wish every manufacturer would do so. Very nice. And you get some nylon nuts as well. Then you do also get a cable to go in between your flight controller and your 4-in-1 ESC. And is that it? That is it. You don't get documentation, you'll get that online, presumably. Whenever you build a quadcopter, by the way, it's it's a good practice to download any documentation on it you can find. By the time you need it, it might be an obsolete product, right? That happens quickly in this industry. And by that time, it might be harder for you to find the documentation. So again, if you are building a quadcopter, download the documentation to your phone or your computer, so you will have that information if you need to work on your quadcopter. Alrighty, so this is an F7 flight controller, and again, this is a 50 amp rated 4-in-1 ESC BL Heli 32. Obviously, this is a higher end stack for GepRC, I guess, F7. So let's see. The first thing I notice is that everything is pretty clean for a full-size stack. It doesn't protrude beyond the 30.5 by 30.5 mounts. And that goes for the 4-in-1 ESC and the flight controller. That's nice. That'll keep the build nice and tidy. The pads, the solder pads, are maybe a little bit smaller than I'm used to, but they'll be big enough. Also, I noticed that there's no hole in the battery lead pads for your capacitor. Is that true? Yeah. No biggie. I don't really need it. It does make soldering up your stack a little bit easier. Again, if there are little holes in the battery lead pads for the legs of your capacitor to stick through. Again, it makes life a little bit easier, but it's definitely not needed. And so I am no electronics expert. Maybe you have an opinion on what the electronics on this 4-in-1 ESC look like. Tell me in the comment section below. To me it looks clean, and again, we'll see what the quadcopter flies like. In fact, in this video I'll fly the quadcopter, and hopefully we'll end up with a well-behaved quadcopter and a clean video feed. So the 4-in-1 ESC, I'm happy to see that it has a USB-C connector. That's one of the things I noticed before I ordered it. I'd be very happy if I never see a micro USB connector on anything, and especially not in the FPV scene. There's no need for it, and it makes the cable management a lot easier. Okay, so we see coils, 3 coils on the bottom side of this board. So one is probably for your 5 volts, maybe, one will be for your 9 volts, as this is meant for DJI Digital. And that third one, what is that? Okay, I looked it up, and I actually do not know. There's no like a 10 volt or anything else circuit on this flight controller. Maybe there's a secondary 9 volt circuit to power the DJI stuff. That could well be. You may tell me again in the comment section below if you possibly know. But so 5 volts and 9 volt, and obviously VBAT on this flight controller. And we do have an Osd chip over here, and that's usual, right? Most flight controllers still have an Osd chip, even though they are meant for DJI Digital. If you hook up a DJI Digital setup, this chip will basically do nothing, as you hopefully know. Right, the Osd in DJI Digital systems is arranged, is provided by your air unit or the Vista set. However, if you run an analog quadcopter, which I will, you will need this here chip over here, which will superimpose your OSD information into your feed. And speaking of, I see all kinds of solder pads, and they are nicely arranged at the edge of our board, which will make soldering things up a lot easier. Now, if you were to use this board like this, or this board in particular, for an analog setup, you could potentially you could use that DJI plug at the bottom of the board to hook up your VTX, for instance. There's 9 volt power on this plug, right? So that can potentially power your VTX, and there's an UART pair in there as well to do smart audio. So the only thing missing there would be your video feed. You'd have to source that from the front of the board. Yeah, video in and out is over here. So I'm not sure if I'm completely happy with that. Obviously, for your camera, it's neat to have the connectors at the front of your board, but for the VTX, meh. Yeah, you'll always have the cable running through your VTX running over. Well, if you have the VTX in your stack, that won't be a problem, and I'm not saying it's definitely a problem, but it would have been nicer. Most boards have the video out at the rear, but this will work. Probably. And let's see, yeah, this being an F7 board, it has more than enough UARTs. In a minute, we'll take a look at setting up this board, how to set it up, or at least how I set this stack up. In fact, it's time to solder the things up into my quadcopter, and maybe I'll run into issues. I don't think so, but yeah, let's see what it looks like in my quadcopter. Hi, cheeky day! We've got a quadcopter with flight controller and 4-in-1 ESC, and it's not screwed down yet. Here is the 4-in-1 ESC, and as you can tell, all motors are connected, as are my battery leads, and the capacitor is in place, so that's nice. I've already checked, all motors work, they spin nice and smoothly, so that's a good sign. And a minute ago I told you to always download and save the documentation for your stack. And I ran into a little bit of a snag there, and maybe you actually already have this stack from GepRC. It's not super duper new. You might have noticed that there is no documentation for this stack. Yeah, so I've done me some swearing to my GepRC contact. And I do have the documentation by now, but I'm not sure, maybe by the time you are watching this video it is online at our site. However, it might be useful to you, if you have this stack, that I show you the documentation I have and give my commentary, my input on that documentation. So let's do that. Let's have a looky at their documentation. Okay, I actually got me this documentation as an Adobe Illustrator file, so it'll look different for you probably. I assume they'll distribute it as a PDF. So, okay, let's have a looky at this documentation. There's the board specs. Air unit support 16 megabytes onboard flash. That's actually interesting. That improves the value, the usability of this flight controller, definitely. And I'm actually looking for firmware targets. GepRC F722 HD. That's the target in Betaflight if you want to update the firmware. Now I've actually already checked. That firmware is not available at the time I'm shooting this video. And it's a bit weird. This isn't a super duper new stack. I've used the GepRC F722, so minus the HD. So far seems to work. Just so you know. I hope that this HD version will be available maybe by the time you are watching this video. Okie dokie, instruction diagram. What do we see here? Yeah, 326S LiPo, it's a BL32, 50 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and it's an F722 HD flight controller. Nothing out of the ordinary there. However, over here you can see that the 4-in-1 ESC does have ESC telemetry and current sensing, and yeah, the flight controller has an ESC telemetry input, an RX4. So if you want to set up ESC telemetry, you'll have to enable that as an ESC sensor in the port tab of Betaflight for UART4. UART4 is your ESC telemetry port. So if you want to use that, yeah, then basically in the stack that'll cost you UART4. Okay, continue. USB-C. Yeah, this is actually interesting, this part. Nothing out of the ordinary. On your left you see peripherals, RSSI 3. Oh, there's a 3 volts pad over here. That's probably where the third coil is for. Okay, got that sorted then, yeah, most definitely, right? Okay, we got buzzer and LED, okie dokie. At the bottom we've got a spot for a GPS, for instance, and T6, R6. Okay, and over here on our right we've got camera input, C1 and C2, and you can actually switch between cameras. It has 2 camera inputs. That might be interesting. For instance, if you want to run this flight controller in an airplane, and if you want to maybe look forward and downwards, set up 2 cameras and, well, switch between them. Very interesting. Not all flight controllers offer that feature, right? And over here you've got basically the connectors for your VTX. Again, it's at the front of your flight controller. Shouldn't be really a problem. And what more can I tell you? Yeah, I'll probably set up my receiver on T2. T2, yeah, over here, so at the rear. No problem, that'll work, right? And okay, so let's see. Yeah, this is very nice. They show you in detail how to hook up all kinds of things. XM Plus receiver, RXSR receiver, and most manufacturers only show you how to hook up an RXSR as an S-Bus receiver, conventionally, to the R2 pad in this instance, but they also show you how to set it up as an F-port receiver. Very nice. Very, very nice. Or an R9 receiver. So yeah, that's better than what I usually see. So yeah, the documentation was missing from the site, but from looking at this, it is better actually. So that's definitely nice. Well done, GepRC. Okay, how to hook up a crossfire receiver. Yeah, DSM2, DSM-X, okay, iBus, even iBus. Not a whole lot of manufacturers show you how to set up iBus on their flight controller, so very, very nice, well done. And ESC, VTX, okay, yeah, UART1 for your VTX here. That's possible. UART1, let's scroll back. Where is UART1? UART1. Is that at the front? Yeah. Transmit 1. Yeah, so this is ground and power for your VTX, and video out, obviously, the signal, and for your smart audio, T1, and VBET if you want to power your VTX from VBET. Okay, back to the VTX settings. Okay, again, UART1 for your smart audio or TBS smart audio tramp. That'll work. Thank you very much. And is that okay? Camera, yeah, camera 1 and or 2 cameras. Very nice. And then you can set up a mode on a switch to switch between the two cameras. So they've actually even explained how that needs to be set up. LED and buzzer, GPS, compass. Oh yeah, that was actually already set up in Betaflight. That's a default setting. GPS on UART 6. Okay, UART 6. Okay, whatever. I guess this is UART 6 over. Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. That's your GPS setup, and that is it. So again, pretty nice. What I said in the beginning of this video, this is the first time I'm using a GepRC stack in a build of my own, and I'm happy to see that the documentation is well done. In fact, better than I'm used to. So, great. Okay, so this is not a how to solder things up, but to summarize, this is where my VTX will be hooked up to, and it'll use transmit 1, UART 1 for the smart audio. I'll hook up a camera over here, one camera obviously in the quadcopter. Then I'll hook up my receiver somewhere over here to transmit 2. And that is it. I won't be using a GPS and obviously not the DJI digital setup. And I'll do that off screen, so you will now be transported to the flying field. Let's see how this quadcopter flies. Alright guys, test flying the GepRC Span F7 HD stack. And what can I tell you? Yeah, I'm at a different spot here because I'm out of the wind here. I'm shielded against the wind by these trees. It's a windy day. Oh well. Yeah, so you'll also see a flying spot you haven't seen all that much, or maybe even never. What I want to see is obviously if the quadcopter behaves well. Stock tune, stock Betaflight setup, no weird things whatsoever. But I mostly want to see if whether the FPV feed is clean, right? That's one of the qualities of any stack that's important to me, at least. Most fly well if you set them up well. Yeah, if the video feed isn't clean, you're suffering. You won't be enjoying your flight. Let's see if this video feed is clean. Here we go. Alright, so I already know from a previous flight that this flying spot isn't all that interesting to look at, but we should be able to see whether the FPV stuff works well and such. And well, if the quadcopter flies, and it does, as you can tell. Yeah. So I'm not sure what it looks like to you in a recording. This is the camera. I'll do a separate short video about the FPV setup itself, by the way. Cadex Ratel and Rush Ultimate Plus tank thing VTX. But you tell me in the comment section below what it looks like. Again, to me it looks pretty good. I can definitely see where the heck I'm going. Again, I'll do a video on the video setup, the FPV setup as well, actually testing the camera. And again, yeah, this flying spot, I'm not sure. But for the purpose of this video, it'll work, right? Pretty clean FPV feed. There is some flickering in the screen sometimes, but I'd say that is actually mostly light reflection from the propellers. Well, I'm not completely sure, but this is completely very much flyable. Yeah, this is definitely not like a stack to avoid or anything. This works. The quadcopter flies well. No bad tendencies at all. Obviously, this is not a reliability test or anything. But again, the quadcopter flies well, and soldered up correctly, you can get a clean video feed. Now, again, this stack is actually intended for DJI FPV, and with DJI FPV you'll most always have a clean signal. I've never seen otherwise actually. If however you'd want to use this stack in an analog setup, also the video feed being clean means that the power setup, the tracing and such on this stack is good. If the power setup would have been non-clean, that would have impacted other aspects of the quadcopter as well. Maybe your filtering, for instance. And so yeah, it's not completely unimportant for DJI setups whether the power setup and filtering and such on a stack is good or not, but you'll mostly see it in an analog setup. Very nice. Okie dokie, man. This works out. Yeah, so far again so good for this GepRC span stack. It works. Yeah, okay, so the documentation was a bit of a letdown, and hopefully by the time you are watching this video they've solved that. And also, at the time I'm shooting this video, the actual firmware wasn't available yet. I am flying an GepRC F722, so not the HD that's mentioned in the manual. Maybe that's important to state because it looks like it works. So by the time you are watching this video, if that HD version of the firmware is still unavailable, you can use the non-HD version if you, that's what I'm using here, so that does work, just so you know. Alright, peace out people. If you are left with questions about this setup or anything else, hit me up a comment down below. Also subscribe, of course. And the link in the description down below will not be an affiliate link. I'm not making any money from this series, just to inform you and maybe entertain you. Again, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video. Bye bye.